Navadip Dome here in the background. Okay, so I think we are live. All right. Well, today is a very special day. Today is the divine disappearance day of three very great divine persons: Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, Srila Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, who were both part of the six Goswamis, right? And also Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who was the author of Chaitanya Charitamrita, of course. So very, very special day for us. And where to begin? Where to begin? Raghunath Das Goswami, he is so important for us. He is our what is known as our Prayojan Acharya. You're familiar with these terms, perhaps Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayojan. All of our whole spiritual journey can be framed, by these three categories. Sambandha is the first stage of understanding who is who, what is what, who are we, what is our real identity, what is the real nature of this environment, what is the proper relationship between everything. And then Abhideya means the path, the way, from here to here, and how we get there. And then Prayoja means the goal. What is the goal? And so Raghunath Das Goswami, he is referred to often as our Prayojana Acharya because he showed us most clearly what is our highest goal, and namely the service of Srimati Radharani. So very important, Acharya for us. And his whole life is an extraordinary example because, every great Vaishnava, they have some important contribution, right? And there's some important teaching that we can take from their lives. But it's not always in a way which is so demonstrable. I mean, in a way that it's not always demonstrated in such a clear way. So like for example, sometimes it's mentioned, Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, anybody can appreciate like his example, right? Even non-devotees, right? Like he left India at like 69 years old with like a few dollars in his pocket and some remote contacts in America, right? And then he ended up, in a sense, living the American dream, right? That's the American dream, right? You go to America with nothing and you can get everything, right? That's like the special quality of America. There's equal opportunity, right, for everyone. So in a sense, Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he lived the American dream, and anybody can appreciate that, even if they don't have any appreciation for the teachings, right? They have to appreciate his example, Whereas if you contrast with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, for example, then that requires a finer level of appreciation, right? To appreciate like what contribution he has given. That's something of requires more refined understanding to appreciate, like in the subjective sense, because sometimes what's being given is more on the subjective plane, so it is less. It's a little can be more difficult for common people to appreciate, right? So what I was coming to say in the case of Raghunath Das Goswami, he demonstrated in a clear way, an example of detachment from this world. And why? Because he was born into a very wealthy family. Like by modern standards, they would have been billionaires, extremely wealthy. But he had zero interest at all, nothing. And he was the only son, right? So he was supposed to, like, the family business, the family wealth, the property, everything was supposed to go to him. He's young, he's beautiful, handsome. Everything that anybody in the world wants, he had it all. He's the only son. And so he also had all this pressure from his family to take up this responsibility, but he had no interest, nothing at all. And it's interesting because his family, they were not exactly Vaishnavas, but they were very pious people, and they're referred to sometimes. We were mentioning in the car the other day, Vaishnava pride means almost like Vaishnava. Like his especially his father and his uncle are mentioned, Govardhana and Hiranya Majumdar. They're very wealthy, they're very pious, and they like to support the Vaishnavas and the Brahmins, but they weren't exactly practicing themselves. Like they liked these kinds of persons. And they supported many Brahmins and many Vaishnavas throughout the district of Nadia. Like for example, Advaita Acharya, he gave some financial assistance to Advaita Acharya, because this was the Vedic, this was like the design of this is one of the plus sides of the whole Varnashram system. It's like an organized system, for every person to be situated properly and supporting like the collective whole. So like what I mean to say is like the working class section, the wealthy persons, it was the tradition, they would support the Brahmins and the sadhus, like that. So the whole structure of the society, was supporting, um, those who were sincere about spiritual practice. So anyway, so Advaita Acharya, for example, is one person who Raghunath Das Goswami's family gave support to, and also Haridas Thakur. It's mentioned how there was one like big public meeting that was held where there was some discussion, and they sponsored this event, Raghunath's family, and Haridas was the guest of honor there. So they were very good, very pious persons. Um, and in fact, it's mentioned that Raghunath Das Goswami, he got the special mercy of Haridas Thakur as a boy. He received the mercy, the association and mercy of Haridas Thakur. Um, so that was his family background. But then, and as you see often, with Hindu families, they like Krishna consciousness, they like the devotees, but they don't necessarily want their children to join the temple, right? They like to give donations, they like to visit on Sundays, but they have that attachment to their particular model of life, you know, their particular structure and life sequence, right? And they don't want their kids to become full-time Hare Krishnas. So Raghunath's parents were like this, And so when Raghunath started to show this inclination, from his, from his being the time of being a young man, he was showing this desire to go and stay with Mahaprabhu. And they were concerned, they didn't like this. and there were many incidents, and at one time they had like guards he had like something like 12 guards who were staying with him all the time, and Raghunath would try and escape and they bring him back, and there were so many things that happened. And then at one time he got permission to visit Mahaprabhu, just for a visit. And at that time Mahaprabhu told him, and it's quite interesting too, Mahaprabhu told him to calm down. That's what he told him. Trying to remember the Bengali. Stira hoya. How Nabatula. No, Gore Jao. He said, go home, calm down, don't be a madman. That was what he told him. Go home, be calm, don't be crazy. Like that. That was what he said. That's what Mahaprabhu told him. And he told him, don't be in a big rush, for your spiritual life. That you will gradually cross over the ocean of material existence. That was the advice that he told, which is interesting because Mahaprabhu gave similar advice to Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis. They also wanted to leave their government work and stay with Mahaprabhu full time, but Mahaprabhu gave a similar advice. And so it's a very interesting point, that we have to remember Krishna consciousness. It's an internal cultivation, first and foremost. We don't have to be overly eager to reject the world, give everything up, but go within, adjust our consciousness. So Raghunath, he followed Mahaprabhu's instructions. He went home at that time, and he actually got married. And for some time he was trying to follow, continuing with his family's business affairs. And Mahaprabhu had also told him, when the time is right, then Krishna will give you the opportunity. Krishna will show the way for you. And there were another point I wanted to mention. Gurudev likes this so much. It's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita that at one time Raghunath's parents, they were like at their wits' end. They were discussing. This is when Raghunath was trying to escape a lot, and they were discussing, how can we, what are we going to do about him? And then at one point his mother said, why don't we just tie him up? Like with ropes, we'll just tie him up. And then the father, he gave a very nice answer. He said, he has a wife who's as beautiful as a heavenly goddess, and he has as much wealth as King Indra in heaven. So, and he said, these are the strongest ropes in this world. So what are just some ordinary ropes going to do? Gurudev liked that a lot. And I mean, it's interesting because his family, they liked the devotees, So on one level, they also appreciated Mahaprabhu. They didn't want Mahaprabhu to have their son full time, but they liked Mahaprabhu. And his father made some comment like, for one who's been blessed by that madman Lord Chaitanya, anything was possible. He made some type of comment like that. There was some type of like family mood actually, between Mahaprabhu and Raghunath's family. So it's also mentioned when Raghunath finally made it to Puri to stay with Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu, he said something really heavy. He said, "Oh, you are so blessed because now you have been rescued from the stool ditch of material life that you were living with your family." And then he said, "I can talk like that because I have a family relationship with your father and your uncle, so I can talk about them like in this like very happy way." Like among family members, you can like insult each other like in a friendly kind of way. So Mahaprabhu made some type of comment like that. But anyway, so for some time, Raghunath, he was quietly continuing with all of his family affairs, but he was waiting. He was watching and waiting, And then he heard one day that Nityananda Prabhu was nearby, right? And he considered he considered, I should see Nityananda Prabhu. And so because he understood at a certain point that before we get the mercy of Mahaprabhu, we have to get the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu. And so Nityan, I can't remember the name of the place where Raghunath was born. But anyway, like around in Bengal, like not too far from. I'm thinking somewhere between Navadvip and Calcutta, but I'm not 100%. But anyway, not too far from Calcutta area, Navadvip area, not too far. If you like on the train, it's maybe a couple hours. The Charlie Merge went there once, or a few times maybe with some of our devotees. Wasn't so far. And then Nityananda, he came to visit Panihati, and Panihati is like in the outskirts of Calcutta. So anyhow, Raghunath got permission from his family to go and visit Nityananda Prabhu, and and it's described how he was always very, very shy, Raghunath, very humble, very shy nature, and so he came at a distance, approaching Nityananda. Nityananda was sitting under a tree with some of his associates, and Raghunath was very shy and coming from some distance, and then from some distance away, he gave his dandavats on the ground to Nityananda. And then Nityananda started teasing him, and he called out, "Oh, what are you doing over there? You are so far away. You come close." And he said something like, "Oh, you are a thief." And then he put his feet on his head, which is very special because Nityananda Mahaprabhu, they generally didn't like people to touch their feet. So only if there was a lot of intimacy between would they do that. So he gave his feet to him, and then Nityananda said, "I'm going to punish you." And he said, "Your punishment is that you're going to feed all of my associates, all of my friends and followers. You're going to feed everyone." And so Raghunath, he happily accepted that. And he was wealthy, right? He had money, so he had the means to feed everyone very nicely. So then the next morning, he organized this big like breakfast feast with this chira, this you've had it in Navadvip, I'm sure. It's this flat. It's like rice that's been cooked and then flattened and then dried. In Bengal, they call it chira. And so this chira, yogurt, fruits, many different types of milk products. Milk sweets, but especially yogurt. It's called dadi. What's it called? Dadi Kheer Mahotsav, I think. Yeah, mostly yogurt in this kheer and fruits and many other, milk products. And it's mentioned how he bought out like all the supplies from all the shopkeepers in the area. And then those same shopkeepers, they came to join the festival. Like people from like in the surrounding areas, they came, they heard about this festival and they came. It was like hundreds and hundreds, and there wasn't enough space for everyone, and people started standing, and it was on the bank of the Ganges River. So it's mentioned how some people started to stand in the Ganges, eating these pots. They had these clay pots, but it's mentioned. I love this point so much. It's mentioned how like Raghunath had bought out all the shopkeepers of their supplies. And then the same shopkeepers, they came to join, and they were getting like free prasadam. I always think of that as like a beautiful example of mercy. Raghunath paid for all of these things, but he's giving it back for free, to the same people who he paid. This is mercy. This causes mercy. It's so beautiful. It's like, I will pay you to be able to give you some mercy. This is so magnanimous. That's how much I want to help you. I'll pay you to try this. I'm not asking that you come, and you pay for this, and not even that I'm just giving it for free, but I will pay you. You see that sometimes, like like with some new product or like an advertising. Sometimes they'll do that, right? Like, we'll pay you to come and try this out. You know, you see that sometimes. This is like Nityananda Prabhu's move. So anyway, this huge festival was held, and Raghunath also, he gave some pranami, like some gold, silver coins to all the honorable persons who came. And it's mentioned that, so Nityananda's there, right? But it's mentioned that Mahaprabhu also came, but like in a hidden form. So only Nityananda Prabhu and a few other people could see Mahaprabhu there. And Mahaprabhu and Nityananda, they had these very beautiful, playful exchanges. Like Nityananda would be feeding Mahaprabhu sometimes in his mouth, and nobody else could see Mahaprabhu, so it just looked a little strange, but he was present there in this hidden way. And so Raghunath, he did this wonderful service, and then afterwards Nityananda Prabhu gave his special blessings to him. And then after that, Raghunath, he understood he was now he was free. And so he started to, because in like in any culture, like big household, there are like different zones, right? So there's like the inner zone where the main family would stay, and then there's an outer zone for others, and there's the most outermost zone, which was for servants. So Raghunath, from that day, he started to sleep in the third zone, where the servants stay. And he still had these guards, who were watching him, but he knew he would get an opportunity now, And so then one morning, very early, maybe 3 or 4 in the morning, then their family guru, he was Jadunandan Acharya, he came by like a little anxious, and he said, he came to Raghunath, oh Raghunath, I need your help because my pujari suddenly had to go, and I need a pujari to take care of the puja in our temple. So please, you come with me, help me, because Raghunath, he had influence, right? So people would listen to him. So he asked, oh Raghunath, you please come and help me to take care of this problem. So Raghunath said, yes, of course, I'll come with you. So he went out with Jadunandan, and everybody saw, oh, he's going with the family guru, right? So we don't have to watch him. We don't have to follow him. But then Raghunath was very clever, and he said, oh, Gurudev, you don't worry about this. I will take care of this. You can go back to your home. Don't worry. So then Jadunandan turned and left, and then Raghunath was alone, And then I think he went and he took care of that problem first, and then he started running. And he was very clever. What he did is he ran in the opposite direction, because he knew that his family would know he was going to Puri, right, to be with Mahaprabhu. So he ran, I think for like a few days, he ran in the opposite direction from Puri. And then finally he turned around and he went to Puri. But he also, another point is, he didn't go on any of the main roads. He went on like small village roads. And it took him 12 days, it's mentioned. And he only ate like on 3 days, something like that. And meanwhile, sure enough, his family, they finally realized he was missing, and they immediately sent some people to Puri, like to investigate. And they saw, he wasn't there, and there was no sign of him traveling there either. So he confused them. And then finally he made it to Puri, and very, very ecstatic meeting with Mahaprabhu. And Mahaprabhu told him that I'm putting you in the care of Swarup Damodar. Sri Damodar was Mahaprabhu's, like closest associate, most intimate associate. It's mentioned that he knew the heart of Mahaprabhu more than Mahaprabhu knew himself. And so Mahaprabhu put him directly in the care of Sri Damodar. And there were a few raghus. There were 2 or 3 Raghunaths. There was a Raghunandan. So like every raghu, like we have a few Giridharis, so like we'll say the American Giridhari or the Hungarian Giridhari, right? The Indian Maheshwari and the Hungarian Maheshwari, the English Kanupriya, right? So there were the few raghus. So every raghu was known in a different way. So Raghunath Das Goswami, he became known as Swarupera Raghu, means the Raghu who belongs to Sri Damodar. that Raghu. Because he stayed so close with Sri Damodar. And there are many incidents that are mentioned. But one of the famous ones is that one day Raghunath, he was feeling like, I came to take shelter of Mahaprabhu, but I've hardly had any direct association with Mahaprabhu. So he was feeling a little disappointed, because of that. And so then, he was always very, very humble, very shy. So he couldn't say anything to Mahaprabhu. But somebody, maybe Sri Damodar, conveyed that to Mahaprabhu. So then Mahaprabhu one day called for Raghunath to come to see him. And then Mahaprabhu told him, I've put you in the care of Sri Damodar, not because that's something lower, like not like you're getting second best, but because Sri Damodar, like he's more than me. He knows better than me what this is. He can instruct you much better than I can. And then he said, however, if you want some personal instructions, then I can tell you something. And then there are these famous verses, Gramya Kata na Shunibe, Gramya Varta na Kuhibe, Baluna Kaibe ar, Baluna Paribe, Krishna Nama Sada Lobe, Amani Manada, Krishna Nama Sada Lobe, Madha Krishna Seva Manasa Karibe, something like that. But these famous instructions he gave, never speak gossip, worldly talks, never hear it. Don't dress too nicely, don't eat too nicely. Always give respect to others without expecting it for yourself. And within your heart, within your mind, always serve Radha Krishna in Vrindavan. So he gave these instructions to Raghunath Das Goswami. And also he gave him, I don't remember I think it was at another time, earlier or later, I'm not sure, but another very special thing is that Mahaprabhu personally gave a Govardhana Sheila to Raghunath. And it was a Govardhana Sheila that someone had given to Mahaprabhu something like 2 years before. And Mahaprabhu, so Mahaprabhu had been carrying this Sheila. One can still have darshan. Actually, that Sheila is in Vrindavan now. This small Sheila, and it's mentioned Mahaprabhu used to hold it to his heart, the Sheila to his heart, to his eyes. He'd cry in ecstasy. And he personally gave that to Raghunath. And also a Gunja Mala, this garland of red berries that represents Radharani. And so that's also significant. And it's also, especially in terms of Raghunath as our Prayojanacharya, because the worship of Govardhan is so important for us. And so Raghunath had this special connection with Giriraj Govardhan, and eventually later he went and stayed, in Govardhan. later after Mahaprabhu left the world, then at a certain point, Raghunath felt Mahaprabhu left, and then Sri Damodar also left. Sri Damodar could not tolerate the separation of Mahaprabhu at all, and so he left the world like one day. It was either the same day or the next day. So, like in one shot, Raghunath lost both Mahaprabhu and Sri Damodar, and so he felt like, how can I carry on? How can I carry on with my life? And so he actually decided to go to Vrindavan and to commit suicide. He decided he was going to jump from the Govardhana hill and commit suicide like that. And so he went to Vrindavan with that intention. And then when he was there, he met with Rupa and Sanatan. And he felt, oh, actually, I thought Mahaprabhu had left, but he's living within Rupa and Sanatan. So he felt like in staying in their company, I can get the association of Mahaprabhu. So he stayed there. He took shelter of them, Rupa Sanatan, especially Rupa Gosami. And he composed some literature, some writings, not as extensively as Rupa Sanatan, Jiva Gosami, but some beautiful prayers to Govardhana, to Srimati Radharani, to Mahaprabhu, to the Vaishnavas. And as we mentioned at the beginning, Raghunath, he particularly showed what is most prominent about the prayers and mood of Raghunath is that he had a very deep affinity for Srimati Radharani. And he showed how the ultimate goal of the Rupa Nuga is the shelter and the service of Srimati Radharani. Even above connection with Krishna, he put more importance on the connection with Radharani. And so sometimes it's mentioned, like we conceive of ourselves, we not ourselves, but our Guru Varga, our line, it's called the Rupa Nuga, right? Rupa Nuga means followers of Rupa. But in a more specific sense, it's said that we are the line of Rupa and Raghunath. Because Raghunath showed even more clearly than Rupa, this ideal of Radha Dasyam, the service of Srimati Radharani. And one of his prayers in particular is very famous. Ashabare Rita Sindhu Mayaka Tanshit, Kalo Mayati Gamita Kila Sankritamhi, Jamchet Kripam Mayivi Dasa Sinai Kimbe, Praner Rajena Cha, Vararuba Karinapi. It's a very, as Srila said, a very bold expression where he's praying exclusively for the service of Radharani and saying that, without your service, I don't have any use for Krishna. Who is Krishna to me without you? That I'm dragging on my days, with this one hope that I will receive, this one aspiration, hope, prayer that I will receive your mercy. That's the only thing that's sustaining my life. And without your mercy, who is Krishna to me? What is Vrindavan to me? What is my life to me? So this was the mood of Raghunath. And he stayed there. One of the most striking qualities of Raghunath is that he's renowned for his vairagya. Vairagya is renunciation. Like his example is unparalleled. Nobody can meet his example. It's mentioned how he only slept for 1.5 or 2.5 hours every day. And he spent like 22.5 hours every day, chanting and, with his spiritual his bhajan life. and he lived on buttermilk. Very, 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 very renounced nature. Even more than the other. All of the Goswamis were very renounced, but he was like on another level. Even they would worry about him sometimes. Like it's mentioned how once he was chanting on the banks of the Jamuna, and or maybe he was writing or something, but there was a tiger that came up next to him and was drinking water from the Jamuna, and then left peacefully. But Raghunath didn't even notice, this tiger. And Sanatan Goswami happened to be nearby, and he saw that, and he was worried. He was concerned about Raghunath, and so I think he organized for some small shelter for him. So even the other Goswamis, like, they were concerned about him sometimes, because he was so renounced, so detached. So that is Raghunath Das Goswami, our Prayojan Acharya, very important in our line. And then Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, he was also, as we mentioned, one of the 6 Goswamis. And he was a little younger. And we don't hear as much about him, but few things are mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's mentioned how he could sing the Bhagavatam verses very beautifully. So sometimes the Goswamis, they would sit together and he would be the one to recite the verses, and he could sing very sweetly. And I remember now also another point that's mentioned about him is that he would never tolerate any criticism. He wouldn't hear anything bad. If anyone tried to tell him something bad about a Vaishnava, he would say, "Oh, they are trying to serve Krishna in some way." He wouldn't hear anything about them. And Mahaprabhu knew him from the time he was a boy. When his father was Tapan Mishra, and originally they were from East Bengal. And Mahaprabhu met him there in his youth, and he ordered him to go stay in Varanasi. And Varanasi, it was a bit of an odd instruction, because Varanasi, it's always been the Mayavad capital of India, and there were hardly any Vaishnavas there. And so to tell a Vaishnava go and stay there was, it was not an easy thing to do, a very common thing. But anyway, Tapan Mishra followed that instruction. And so his wife, and they had this one boy, Raghunath Bhatta. And then later, when this is before Mahaprabhu took sannyas, he gave that instruction. And then later, after Mahaprabhu had taken sannyas, he's traveling through India, and then he happened to meet them when he was in Varanasi. And so then maybe he stayed with him, or he would take prasadam with the family. Maybe he stayed with Chandrasekhar, and he'd take prasadam at Tapan Mishra's. But anyway, he would meet with him almost every day, and the father of Raghunath Bhatta. And it's mentioned how Raghunath Bhatta, he had very intimate services to Mahaprabhu. Like he would wash his dishes, and he would wash his clothes, he would massage him. He's very, as like a young boy, he had these intimate services to Mahaprabhu. And then Mahaprabhu and Mahaprabhu's instructions to him, they're quite exemplary, I feel. Because Mahaprabhu told him, so then later when Raghunath was a little older, he went to visit Mahaprabhu in Puri. And he wanted to stay with Mahaprabhu. But Mahaprabhu told him, your parents are Vaishnavas, so you should take care of them. And so he ordered him, and he said, don't get married, but take care of your parents while they're still alive. And after your parents leave this world, then go and stay with Rup and Rupa and Sanatan in Vrindavan. So that's what he did. He served his parents, took care of them until their last days in Varanasi, and then later he went and stayed in Vrindavan with the other Goswamis there. So that's Raghunath Bhatta, and then the third, exalted Vaishnava we're remembering today is Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, who we are so deeply indebted to because he's given us Chaitanya Charitamrita. The greatest theological literature that has ever seen the light of day. So what a great, great debt we have to his holy lotus feet. And one interesting point about Krishnadas Kaviraj is that similar to Raghunath, there's the same sequence that first he got the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu. And he didn't actually meet Mahaprabhu in person. Krishnadas Kaviraj is younger, next generation down. So he was a little younger. He didn't meet Nityananda in person. He's maybe 2 generations after Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu. So he just missed them. He didn't have a direct connection. But Nityananda came to him in a dream. And there's this famous incident when Krishnadas Kaviraj's brother was disrespectful to Nityananda. His brother worshipped Mahaprabhu but didn't respect Nityananda. And so Krishnadas Kaviraj, he chastised his brother because of that. And then that night, and this is like in is this Jamalpur or maybe Jamatpur? Maybe Jamatpur. It's somewhere on the way to Ekachakra, but again, not too far from Navadvip. And so that night, Nityananda was pleased with him, because he had stood up. He wasn't quiet, but he stood up for the truth, for what was right. So Nityananda was pleased with him, and he appeared to him in a dream that night. And there's this really beautiful description in Chaitanya Charitamrita of this vision that he had. And Gurudev really liked that description. And in fact, when that that book The Glories of Nityananda, that you have a copy here, I think, the Nityananda Mahimamrita. When that was published, Gurudev looked at it and he said that the devotees should have included that section describing that vision of Nityananda because Gurudev liked it so much. So there was a second edition where I think it was included. Yeah, that's the book. Yeah. But anyway, it's so beautiful how it describes how Nityananda, he's a little intoxicated. He tends to be a little intoxicated because he's intoxicated with Krishna Prema, with Gaura Prema. So he's swaying, and it's mentioned how there are these bumblebees hovering around him, and his associates, the cowherd boys, are around him. And my favorite description is how it mentions how his teeth were like pomegranate seeds, because he liked to chew this pan, this kind of tobacco, and it stains your teeth red. And so this analogy is given to pomegranate seeds, because pomegranate seeds, you see the white seed, it's translucent, right? Little transparent, the flesh, this light red flesh. You see the white seed. So Nityananda's teeth, they look like that. Normally when people chew that pan, it doesn't look very attractive, right? But in the case of Nityananda, it was very beautiful, very charming. It's enhancing his beauty. And also mentions how he's chanting Krishna, Krishna, as he's swaying back and forth. And then in his dream, Nityananda tells to Krishna's Kaviraj, Ade Ade Krishna Das Nakro Ho Boy Vrindavana Jaha. Oh, what is it? Ade Ade Krishna Das Vrindavana Jaya. Ade Ade Krishna Nakro Ho Boy Vrindavana Jaha Taha Sarva Labhya Hoy. That's it. He says, oh, like, get up, Krishna Das. Don't be afraid about anything. You go to Vrindavan, you'll get everything there. So then that morning, Krishna arose with this vision very vividly in his mind. And then he, almost immediately, he started out, for Vrindavan. And Rup and Sanatan, they'd already left. Raghunath, I think Rupa and Sanatan had already left by that time. But Raghunath was still there. And he took shelter. Srila Sridhar Maharaj describes him as a disciple of Raghunath Das Goswami. And so this is what is so extraordinary, that Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, he didn't meet Mahaprabhu, didn't meet Nityananda Prabhu, but he gave the most profound esoteric literature surrounding the life of Mahaprabhu. Like, he had the most profound revelation about, only Krishna's Kaviraj has revealed, Mahabhav, Rasaraj Mahabhav Duyat Roop. I don't know, what's the other one I'm trying to remember? Radha Bhava Duti Suvolitam, Naomi Krishna Srupam. Krishna enhanced, enriched by the heart and halo of Srimati Radharani, like this inner nature of who Mahaprabhu is. Practically nobody else even knew about that, what to speak of like presenting it in the literature. So how is it possible Kaviraj Goswami didn't even meet Mahaprabhu, was able to give this? Because he had the right connections. It's all about connection. It's all about relationships, right? So Krishna's Kaviraj, he took shelter of Raghunath Das Goswami. Who's Raghunath? Raghunath had 12 years close association, direct association with Mahaprabhu and Srup Damodar, the most intimate associate of Mahaprabhu. So Kaviraj like connected through this channel, and so he got this inside view that almost nobody else had. And so there were literally senior devotees in Vrindavan who requested Kaviraj Goswami, like, you please give something, because they could understand because of his connection with Raghunath and this line, he'll be able to give something more that we don't have. Because already there was Chaitanya Bhagavat. It was known as Chaitanya Mangal at the time. There were already several other books that had been published about Mahaprabhu's life, and very authentic. Chaitanya Bhagavat is also very pure devotional literature, which is also studied and revered and worshipped, right, by the Vaishnava group, the Gaudiya Vaishnava group. But even so, they felt Krishna's Kaviraj, he'll be able to give something extra. A group of Vaishnavas especially requested him, you please give something. And so then he came to give Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is such an extraordinary text, because in terms of the Siddhanta, in terms of the philosophy, and as well as in terms of the poetry, it is so refined, so perfect. Like on every level, it is a perfect spiritual literature, perfect text, materially and spiritually, we could say, from one perspective. Very, very profound and very beautiful text. And And yeah, and in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's about Mahaprabhu, right? But there are a few places where we get a glimpse into the inner heart of Kaviraj Goswami, where he's writing this in his last days. He's maybe in his 80s, and so a few places you get some glimpse into what he's going through. He can't write well. He's losing his eyesight. He has some stiffness in his hands. He feels he could leave the world anytime. So sometimes there's this urgency, this desperation, this intensity of feeling that's coming out in his writing. Like he's sometimes summarizing later parts of the book because he's afraid he won't be able to get to them. So like at the beginning of the middle section, he gives a summary of the last section. The beginning of the Madhya Lila, he gives a summary of the Antya Lila, because he's not thinking, oh, I'm an empowered, great devotee of Krishna, I can do anything. He's not thinking like that. He's thinking, I'm a very fallible, frail human being, and I'm subject to all these material forces. So in this very humble and desperate mood, sometimes he's writing. Other times he's in a very detached way. He's observing the greatness of this work. He's not seeing it as his own work. Like some places he's saying, I worship anyone who just hears this book because it's so great. But he's not thinking it's his own work. He sometimes, a few times he says, I'm just a puppet. I'm just a puppet. The Lord is pulling the strings. I'm just a puppet. As my Lord inspires me, so I'm writing. I'm an instrument here. I'm in the middle of this transaction. So sometimes very moving. Some of these descriptions of personal expressions of Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So they all left on this holy day, this Titi, this lunar date. And actually, Gurudev, Gurudev also left. It's Gaur. I think it's, what is the Titi exactly? It is let me see here. It's Govardhana, I think. I don't remember. Because Gurudev left on the same Titi as I recall. Because there's the different phases of the moon. There's the waning moon, the waxing moon, and the waning moon, and then the particular phase in the waxing or waning. And Gurudev left on the very same. Let me see here. Dwadashi, that's right, Gaur Dwadashi. So Gaur Dwadashi means the 12th day. Yesterday was Akadashi, the 11th day. So today is Dwadashi, the 12th day, and the Gora means in the bright, the waxing moon. So Gaur Dwadashi, the 12th day, and the waxing. Gurudev also left on that day, which is very significant, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta, Krishna's Kaviraj, they're all like Madhura Rasa Acharyas, very much so. And so Gurudev chose to leave on that same day. That is not an accident. Okay, well, we will stop there. We're very blessed that we can remember these great souls in our humble, small way, asking for forgiveness for our offenses. And we pray for their grace, their mercy, that we may stay on this path. Attempting to serve. We have such privilege that we can try to serve such great masters. And we can hear something about their wonderful lives and their wonderful examples. Very inspiring and purifying, uplifting for us. Okay, let's stop there. Jai Sheila Raghunath Das Gosami ki Jai, Sheila Raghunath Bhatta Gosami ki Jai, Sheila Krishna's Kaviraj Gosami ki Jai, Hari Tido Bab Mahamahotsavi ki Jai, Jai Sheila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Gosami Maharaj ki Jai, Sheila Bhakti Rakshak Sheila Dev Gosami Maharaj ki Jai, all the assembled devotees ki Jai, the world devotees ki Jai, Shri Hari Ram Sankirtan ki Jai, Jai Gorpin.
Vishakadiri ki Jai.
Turn this off here.